The Dimp Digital Network presents Idle Game Chat.
Hello, Apps here from the Dimp Digital Network, and welcome to Idle Game Chat and our Game of the Year ceremony for 2019. So we're going to run through our nominations for 2019 and reveal the official Dimp Digital Game of the Year for that year. We have 6 games in total, so I've called in one of the big guns to run through each of these. He is a one-time Fantasy Gaming League champion with 1 successful defence, and he was the runner-up in the 2019 Dimp Digital Gaming Quiz. It's one of the OGs. It's Hall. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, not bad, mate. You?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. How are you finding a year without being on the front line for the FGL Championship? You know, you're
It's
back
fucking
in the...
killing me. Hurting my soul to watch those two squabble it out, to be completely honest, and be resided to the sidelines. But I've got to focus on the job at hand, win the individuals, and get back to the big leagues ready for next year.
How do you feel like the Grand Prix is going? Do you feel like you're in a good position? Your games that have come out have all scored pretty well so far.
Yeah, not going too shabbily. It's hard, man. Like when you look at last year, and I think there was only 2 or 3 games that scored above 90, and this year already we've had 6 or 7 in out of the fantasy picks alone. So it's been it's been a strange one this year. When my first few started rocking in at 89, I was like, yeah, I'll be sitting pretty. And then, like I say, there's been some real high scorers. I think we've even had a 96 this year. So I think it's up in the air. It'd be a good competition this year. It just depends on people pulling their fingers out. I mean, the fact that people haven't even managed to submit 10 games in the first place is enough to make anyone cringe. And with obviously everything that's going on at the minute, I don't know what's going to be delayed and what's going to come out and what's going to happen. So it's going to be an interesting one.
You're definitely right about that. I expect there will be some delays in the gaming space, whether it's hardware or definitely software because of this, because it's just some businesses have had to grind to a halt, and the gaming industry's not immune to that. You got to think that a lot of the people working there, specifically say in art areas, the rigs that they've got at work to run those things and run all the programs they need is probably going to be quite high powered. So unless they're going to somehow set them up with a virtual desktop or whatever, I don't know. But I can't see there not being any casualties in the gaming space.
It's just difficult to imagine with everything that's going on. I mean, we're talking about, you know, at least 6 months to 8 months before we get back to normality or some form of normality. I just can't see how it's possibly gonna pan out as normal. So be interesting to see.
Absolutely. We was originally going to do this particular podcast a while back, but we ran into a bit of a delay because you decided to have a Domino's one night, and it sort of it cost us about 4 weeks of recording this. But the question on everyone's lips is, how was that Domino's, and was it worth it?
It was acceptable. I'll be honest. We had another one last night. And it's a real rarity that I'm allowed at Domino's. Normally the wife absolutely puts a stop to that almost immediately. And then we ordered one last night, and because of the lockdown and everything, they only had about 4 pieces to choose from.
Oh.
Absolutely pathetic. No stuffed crust available.
Jesus.
Absolutely unbelievable scenes. Then they rang me and said, we haven't got any potato wedges, so we're going to have to give you an extra set of chicken kickers. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll allow that.
Yeah.
But
That's not a bad exchange. I like the kickers.
Yeah, better than
Wedges.
Yeah, over wedges and that. The wedges are good. We had a set of kickers already, so it just meant double kickers.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
I had one the other night, weekend I think it was, and I had a stinker. I've normally 1/2 barbecue, 1/2 normal. Selected that, they came both as normal tomato, and I was like, right, that's annoying.
Right.
I like the barbecue side as like the little treat at the end.
Yeah.
That annoyed me. And because I'd flapped around with the order so much, I had left it on classic crust, which I don't like. I like to have thin and crispy. So two whammies, and I was sitting there, annoyed. And half of it was my fault, but the other half was definitely Domino's
Oh, they're catastrophic for getting our orders incorrect. I can't remember the last time that we had one that was absolutely spot on. There's always something.
Yeah, that's the way it is at the moment. Getting back onto the gaming scene of things, we're just entering the second quarter of the year, and we're taking a look back at 2019. Overall, how did you find 2019 as a gaming year in terms of games and other interesting bits and pieces that may well have come out? Was it a good one in the middle, or a bit of a thumbs down?
It's tough because, I mean, we were talking just before we started doing this podcast about, the games that we played, and the fact that we're in a situation now where it's rare that I will play a crap game.
Yeah.
Because so many games are available, and I mean, I like physical copies, but a lot of bits and pieces that are available are on Xbox Game Pass or on Games with Gold or whatever. It's quite easy to play bits and test them out, even if I play them on Game Pass before I buy a physical copy, which I get a lot of people are going to be angry about, but is what it is. So the games that I played, none of them were really that bad. There wasn't anything that I thought, "God, this is a real stinker, I'm going to have to put this down." I played quite a lot last year, more than I probably have done for the last few.
Yeah.
But nothing, very, very few that really blew me away in terms of absolute huge triple. I mean, I'm expecting 2020 with some of the titles that are coming out this year to surpass last year in terms of releases, despite the fact that I thought last year wasn't too bad, to be honest.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, when it came to difficult, it was difficult to pick a winner, really. Whereas I feel like 2018, it was pretty much Red Dead or God of War seemed to be the consensus. Yeah. This year, I mean, any of the 6 that we've got on our nomination list, they all had a decent case, and no one was really head and shoulders above one another.
No, there was a lot of discussion amongst the Dimp guys as to which 6 we were going to put forward as well. I mean, the list was probably 12 or 15 games long that we had to cut down to 6. And obviously, because not everyone's played every game, it's quite tricky because it's a lot of opinion. But I'm happy with the list that we've got. Having obviously not played all of them myself, I'm still reasonably content with the 6 that we put together for our short list.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's crack on to that. We'll go through each of the nominations. Now, I've played 5 out of the 6 of these. So I'll probably be covering off the majority of them, and you've played the one that I haven't played. So we've got coverage on all the games. I don't know if you want to kick things off and pick a game to go through, and then we'll take it from there and just freestyle it.
Yeah, well, there was a few. There was a few on the list that I really wanted to play, and that I was a bit gutted that I didn't get around to. The one that I want to start with purely because is the most bizarre thing in the way. It's Kojima gone mad, isn't it? I'm talking about Death Stranding.
Yes.
And the feedback that from people that have played it to people that haven't and everything, it's so mixed and so varied. But it's got this bizarre appeal by looks of things. Like, I mean, a lot of people that I spoke to that have played it have said it's just so addictive and such a strange concept that it just works.
Yeah.
I think Smithy called it Postman Pat Simulator, didn't he?
Yeah,
but the whole thing just looked so bizarre, and like the build up to it as well was so bizarre. But yet here it is on our list as one of the best games of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spent nearly 100 hours in Death Stranding.
That's crazy, man.
I know.
100 hours.
Something like, I'm sure it's nearly that sort of area of hours. I mean, it was really a time sink. Kojima's a mad cunt. There's no other way to describe him. And I don't think anyone could make kind of being a Postman Pat or an Amazon parcel delivery simulator fun and interesting, but he did find a way, and it's 100% a polarizing game. Like, some people just will not mesh with this. 100%. And I'd never say to anyone who didn't like it, "You're an idiot," because it is one of those games. And to be honest, when I first started it, I was like, "Jesus, what am I doing here?" But it's funny that we're talking about this now, where with all the COVID-19 business going on, where actually the game itself is set around people having to self-isolate because of a catastrophic event, and the people keeping the world going are the delivery people and those that are handing out orders. So it's I don't know whether Kojima had an eye on what was going on and predicted it, but that's odd. And the other sort of strange irony is that we're playing Animal Crossing at the moment.
Yeah.
And it, I'm loving it, but a lot of it's pointless shit, really. And this is in that kind of category where if you get hooked on just doing, the grindy stuff, you are going to love it. And that's, I think, what happened. I think me and Adkins were both championing this one to go on the short list because it is so different.
Yeah, I mean, because to be honest, I've been, other than having seen a lot of the hype around it and having spoken to you guys a little bit about it, I don't know much about it. But in terms of how did it play? Was it a linear type thing, or are we talking full on open world? You can go off. Is there side quests or equivalents or whatever, or is it? I mean, having heard you say that you put 100 hours into it, that is such a long time.
Yeah.
That's obscene. Nowadays, games, I generally expect like a story mode or a campaign or something to take maximum 30 to 40 hours.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then, big open world games to maybe take somewhere in the region, like a maximum of double that once you include doing all the side bits and pieces. And it's, I get that not everyone 100% every game that they play, but 100 hours is an awful long time to put into anything. Yeah. I mean, what is the breakdown of it? Is it a linear game or is it full on open world? I don't know enough about it to be able to.
Yeah, it starts off as a linear game basically, and then it cracks open into an open world.
Get to a stage where you can. Yeah,
it really opens up. It's 2 maps essentially, and once you get off sort of the first location or map, it kind of blows open a lot more, and there's a lot more freedom for you to do.
Right,
you mean there are side quests, so there's like story based orders as they're called, which if you do that, you'll follow the cutscenes, you'll get the story, and you'll get to the quote unquote the end of the game. But in amongst them, there's like side deliveries, which some have individual little mini stories attached to them. So there might be several stages of a story, and if you do all of them, you might get a little payoff at the end. But because it's a shared world, the online aspect, I think, is the thing that really tipped me into wanting to have this on the list. Because you're in a shared world of sorts, stuff that you put down, other people can use, and it tracks how many people use your items and give you likes and things like that. And also, you can take advantage of other people's handiwork, whether it's a ladder in a convenient place to help you over a ridge, or a rope to help you get up a mountain. It felt like they structured it in a way that you'll always find someone else's work there to help you out of a jam.
Right. Okay.
I got really addicted to setting up the roads. So there's no roads when you first get to like the second location, and in order to get around, you can walk, but it's much easier to drive around in a truck or a bike. Trouble is, if you don't have a road, they're solar powered. You run out of battery quite quickly. Whereas if you've got a road, it charges whilst you're on, the tarmac. So I set this is not even anything to do with the story. There's no reward for this, but I set a task myself of building every single road platform that I could.
Jeez. And
that's probably where 40 hours might well have gone.
Well, I was going to say that'd be a real life South Park.
It was at least half a dozen hours or to a dozen hours though spent doing that. So that's the sort of thing. I just got distracted on that for ages, and then ended up finishing the game.
Thing is, that's the type of thing that shows it's the sign of a good game, where you can sit and you can do something like that. I mean, I'm a terror for a monotonous task. I like to have like a mind-numbing task like that, which is why I enjoy stuff like Minecraft or Animal Crossing, as you say, that we've got going on at the minute. But there's something addictive about things like that when you find something, especially when there is some reward that's not just for yourself. Like you've got that collaborative gameplay to a certain degree.
Yeah,
it's good.
It's definitely in that ballpark. And sometimes you just don't want. It's not a particularly hard game, and sometimes I don't want to be running around ripping demons' heads off and shoving it up their arse. It's kind of just nice to chill. You can just sort of mong off and sit there and play it and you look and you go, Christ, that's 3 hours gone there.
Yeah,
I haven't even thought about anything else. So it's definitely one of those games where you can sort of just disappear into and stay away and just soak it all up.
A strong contender.
Yeah, absolutely. A polarising contender for sure, but I would say a strong one.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at the rest of the list, another one that I really wanted to play, but never got round to it again, was Control, which I didn't know much about. Again, I didn't know much about it before release. I feel like it wasn't hyped like in the same way that like a Death Stranding or a lot of the other big games that came out last year were. But again, I mean, this one, whilst Death Stranding kind of had the, like you say, a polarizing opinions of one extreme or the other, this seemed to pretty much unanimously be hailed as one of the best games of the year.
Yeah, it's a great new IP, and Remedy have kind of, I think Remedy have had a bit of an up and down. Like, remember, we had Max Payne back in the day. More recently, Alan Wake, which again was quite polarizing. And then what was the other one? Quantum Break, which came out a few years back on Xbox One. So they always had good ideas, but they didn't, in my view, didn't quite string it together to be like a really, really top game. Whereas Control, they've got this great new setting, a sort of a Metroidvania structure, good story, and the gameplay and the actual controls themselves, again, ironically, I don't know if they made sure the controls were good, but they are exceptional. And really, the only real blemish on it was the performance, which blighted maybe 10% of the game. And that's a console problem, I believe. If you've got a PC, you probably won't run into those. But, you know, the exploration combined with the shooting and the combat and the different skills that you unlock, as well as it being set in a very unique and interesting environment, was outstanding. It's just such a good, pure action game just to play.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking through now at some of the awards and bits and pieces that it was nominated for, and obviously the big one that we generally look at is the Game Awards, and I appreciate it didn't win a lot of the awards that it went up for, but to be considered for, I mean, it was Game of the Year, Game Direction, Best Narrative, Best Audio Design, Best Performance for two of the casts that were in it, Best Action Adventure. It looked as though it was quite similar to Alan Wake and Quantum Break and bits and pieces, but obviously had a little bit something extra about it to kind of snag people's eyes for that as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether, I think it's Alan Wake. I remember researching about that, and it may have been one of the reasons why I went to Xbox in the end, because I remember it being an Xbox exclusive. But I remember there being a big article about how the game had gone from like a proper open world game to a more linear sort of survivalish horror game, and that kind of blighted it. Quantum Break obviously had the baggage of, you've got to watch 20 minutes of a live action episode after each level, which, I don't know, why would you do that? I don't know
that's
whose idea that was. Well. So they both had this sort of baggage with them, whereas Control was a fresh new approach, and they just got the fundamentals right and offered some really interesting and compelling ways to tackle the problems they put in front of you in terms of puzzle solving, and the combat's just excellent. And with so many games that give you, high amount of different attributes and powers and whatnot, normally you're fiddling around on a fucking like weapon wheel, flashing between them all and trying to get this is like all on the controller, face buttons. If you want to pick something up and throw it at someone, you can do it. If you want to levitate, you can do that. It's just, they've really nailed.
Goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's such a frantic pace as well. The last thing you want is getting costed by the controls.
It's clunky controls, yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's such a big thing now as well, with a lot of sort of shooting games or action adventure games, that they try and overcomplicate things, like you say, with weapon wheels, and when you open up a menu, it goes into slow motion to give you time to do it and whatever, and it's very difficult to get the balance right. So it's nice to hear that they've done so well to keep it simple, but evidently it still works. Yeah.
It's definitely a great action game, and it's not as I was expecting, quite a cinematic game, purely based on like their previous games, but it's more of a straight action game really when it comes to the structure itself. There's not a lot of major cutscenes, and it's it lets you go off and explore, and you unlock abilities that you can now open the new door or get onto the new level, and it's all tangled in with side quests and the main campaign to run through.
Yeah, it might still be one that I go back to, having. The problem is there's just so many games to play through, but it is still one that I would like to pick up at some point and have a little bash through, because, I mean, in terms of length, I'm guessing it's not got the 100 hours that you put into Death Stranding, but
no.
Still, if it's anything like, I mean, cutscenes aside, Quantum Break wasn't the longest game in the world, but I'm guessing it's kind of similar, if not slightly longer, in terms of playability.
Yeah, I think it's just shy of a dozen hours or so.
Which isn't too bad, I suppose.
No,
especially not now if I'm picking it up and it's reduced in price and all the rest of it for being a year old. So,
and I haven't done everything either. I haven't done all the side quests or got 1000 G or whatever. So there's other stuff to be getting on with once the game's finished if you haven't done them during your first run. Okay, quite cool.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, should we move on to what's next? Which this one is one that. I mean, I know I've said this about Control as well, but this one I literally knew absolutely zero about. The only time when this even cropped up on, I think, most of our radars is when it came through on OpenCritic as having one of the highest scores of the year, which is Disco Elysium.
Yeah.
Now, I know that I think only you and Chappers have played this. Maybe Dave's put a couple of hours into it, but this was a complete out of left field. I don't think anyone had it on their radars. Anyone really knew about it. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you were ahead of the curve on this, but I think I'm right in saying that. Like I say, completely out of left field and seemingly absolutely smashed it.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't one I was counting down the days to on release. It was one of those ones that released and then got the positive reception and got traction through that way and also through word of mouth. And looking at it, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, I think. I'd already previously missed out on Divinity Original Sin 2, which was a highly critically acclaimed, at the time was a PC-only game. And then I was like, I'll wait for it to come on the consoles, then I'll play it. And it came on the consoles. I never did because it felt old and, I never did it. So I didn't want to make the same mistake with Disco Elysium. And, it's these games, it's an RPG. It's an old school isometric RPG. So... yeah, if you like your action, this is not the game for you. No. And at first, it kind of seemed like it was a game that is just trying to be weird for weirdness' sake. But you kind of realise that it's all tied together by this very unusual mechanic, whereby the character you're controlling has voices in his head. And each of them kind of represent different attributes of his body. So one might be intelligence, one might be empathy, one might be his physical strength. There's about, I think there's 24 different skills, and they all have a certain role to play during your course through the game. And obviously you can upgrade certain stats and ignore certain stats, and that gives you different approaches to get past certain points in the game. And it's like Homer Simpson, where he's like arguing with his own brain. It's that basically, but there's tons of them, like different parts of your psyche that are all going to be influencing and trying to get you, because they talk to you. It's all text based in terms of like dialogue, so there's no real voiceovers, but they'll just chip in with like funny comments or telling you what you should do next and all that. And depending on which ones you've kind of leveled up, you'll get more reliable information off those ones than perhaps one that you've left in the lurch. It's very, very strange. It will be overwhelming to some people, but because it's a slow-paced game, you've got plenty of time to just sort of acclimate yourself to the world and the game and not worry too much about steamrolling through.
Yeah, like I say, it seems like such an odd one, and I knew a little bit about once obviously it was released. I did a bit of sort of a look into it, and I'm interested to see how well I think it's coming out on PlayStation and Xbox this year at some point, so it might be the opportunity to pick it up and give it a play. I don't know whether that's happened because of the huge success that it's had on Steam and Windows and all the rest of it, or whether that was always planned. But it's just it's one of those absolutely bizarre. It kind of reminds me of Heavy Rain, I think it was, where it seems to be. Obviously, it's so heavy in terms of dialogue and the decision trees that you go down to make it. I imagine you could play through it 4 or 5 times and go down a different section of the character's psyche, 24 different inputs. And whilst it won't change the game hugely, you could certainly play it in a very, very different way each time that you go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way the game's kind of set up is... in most games, the player themselves, the character you're playing rather, is already got a backstory, a history, all that, and they know what they're about, but you don't because you've only just turned the game on. Well, the character you play is an absolute pisshead basically, So you wake up in like a trashed hotel motel room with a massive hangover, no memory of what just happened or who you are or what you do. So as you go through the game, you find out more information about the character you're playing, along with the character himself. So it's nice to put you on that even keel with them for once, because usually, you know, they're already self-aware essentially, but you're in the same situation as the character.
Yeah.
And it also gives you, it makes that, having that little key there gives you much more liberation over how you level him up, because you're not tied to previous decisions that he's made or any sort of character that he may be trying to influence you. You are essentially building him from scratch again. So you've got an opportunity to shape him how you wish to. And yeah, I mean, it's really funny. The two things I would say that probably let it down just a little bit are everything is text-based in terms of dialogue, like 99% of it, and there is a lot of reading. So if you're not into reading, this is not the game for you. And it's probably a little bit too long, in all honesty. Like, for what it is, I think I played 34 hours. That was the first run through. So granted, I won't be steamrolling through, because I was trying to figure stuff out on the fly. But it's quite meaty, and that coupled, I guess, with the text reading was...
it's a lot to commit to, isn't it?
Yeah, but certainly a game that you could pop on once a week or twice a week and just make a bit of progress and then come back to. Very funny, very unique, and, you know, a true RPG to the letters.
Frankly, unbelievable that it came out from an indie studio as well, to have a game of that kind of critical success, and also a game of that length. Like, a lot of, I mean, that's like you say again, 30 odd hours is it's a heavy investment, and normally a lot of the indie games that you see come out almost a sort of like borderline mobile game type bits and pieces. It's rare that you get something that's this involved and this big a game from such a small developer publisher. So fair play to them.
Yeah, they've done a really good job, and all the accolades they've got are well deserved. Yeah,
definitely. Well, other games on the list we've got. I mean, this one was one that was fought for by Biff more than most, I think, which is Star Wars Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Now, I'll be honest, I haven't played Fallen Order. I haven't played Battlefront 1 or 2. So I haven't played any of the Star Wars games for a long time. In fact, the last ones I've played were probably the Force Unleashed saga, which were obviously fun for what they were, but I generally avoid games that have got tie-ins to film and or television programs, purely because I feel like they're almost always pumped out for the sake of they're tied into the release of a film to boost the ticket sales of the film. And I mean, I don't know, I can't remember, was it The Last Jedi that came out last year?
Yes.
Film. Yeah. So this again, I was worried.
Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker. Sorry, yeah. So I was worried again that this was going to be one of those ones that fell into that category. And as I said, having not played either of the other previous two Star Wars, the feedback from Battlefront was it feels like you're in the film in terms of the sounds and the looks and everything were great, but there wasn't loads in terms of gameplay to keep people going back. They obviously didn't have a single player campaign or anything. They were just an online brawl or basically a big team deathmatch or whatever you want to call it. So this was a bit more, I was a little bit more intrigued because it has got, I'm right in saying it's got a campaign story.
Yep.
What did you I mean, obviously, like I say, Biff speaks of it very highly. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, it's just good to have a Star Wars game that's not a complete sham or has some sort of controversy attached to it.
Yeah.
So we had Battlefront 1, which was multiplayer only, and people were like, it's not all that. Battlefront 2, which had all the loot box shit that came with it.
Drama,
Yeah, and this was just, A to Z, action, exploration, bit of a blend of Metroidvania, a bit of a blend of Dark Souls, quite a bit of platforming. It was just a nice blend of all the different elements that have probably come in the forefront in the last decade or so, or the last few generations of games, blended into one. Star Wars slapped all over it with, in terms of look, feel, characters and whatnot. And at the end of it, they've produced a very competent, good Star Wars game that doesn't do much in terms of originality, but borrows the right elements that make this a good package and an overall a good game to work through. And if you're a Star Wars fan, like Biff is, and like many people are, it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Be all over it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not bad. It won't bastardise the series. It's not going to ruin any of your favourite films. It's actually going to enhance, your view of Star Wars, because they do such a good job of it. Respawn, the daddies, they obviously Titanfall and Titanfall 2, their last two games, and Apex, which didn't make our list, but they've done a good job here, and it's the first time EA as a publisher has probably got a game that Star Wars fans can put their hands on and say, okay, we're happy with that, because like I said, the last two were just mired in controversy.
Yeah, so I mean, this one, a lot of people put comparisons to the Batman games in terms of the way that they play, and the worry again, because with stuff like this, and we talked about it on Control about how right they got it in that game. I always worry that the controls are going to be really clunky, and things like wielding the lightsaber is never going to feel quite right because it's difficult to get it. And there's been a lot of games in the past that have tried different bits and pieces, even with like motion controls on the Wii. Just stuff never quite got wielding something quite right for me. It never really felt comfortable or proper in terms of you were either holding a button just to deflect stuff, or it didn't really ever feel that interactive. But I don't know how this got on with it, but in terms of, like I say, that general feel of how you're playing it, is it comfortable? Does it work? Is it?
Yeah, I think for general just sort of lightsaber combat and wielding and deflection, like the basics are quite strong. Right. It's a little. Sometimes I felt like there's a bit of hit detection that wasn't quite right. Like I got hit, and I was like, "Did I really get hit there?" I don't know about that, but it could be just be me being salty about it. But generally, like your base sort of interactions with the lightsaber are really good. It's a bit more slowed down, so you won't have people like 10 people all just try and melee and attack you at once. So it's fair in the way that it gives you a little bit of leeway in that sense that you might have only 2 people attack you at once with like clubbed weapons while someone's shooting you, so it gives you that little bit of time to manage and dictate, whereas you'd think in real life they'd all just charge at you and you'd get overwhelmed.
And you'd get overwhelmed quickly.
But the basics are good. I think as the game goes on and you get more powers, this is the problem that Control didn't have, it gets a little bit more complex, and there's always that power that you get, and you think, or that attribute you're going to get, and you think that's really going to make the difference here. And because it's a pain in the arse to execute, you find you never use it. You just stick to what you know. And that's where I got towards the back end of the game. I was like, right, I know this lunging attack works really well, so I'm going to stick to that. I'm going to parry when I can. I'm going to block when I can. And I think as you get more and more powerful, you don't quite feel as in control, because you're thinking, maybe I should be using this, that, and the other. But it's still, in terms of wielding a lightsaber,
stick to what you know.
You can get away with it. I guess that's the good thing, is that it didn't force. Well, it's a good thing and a bad thing. It didn't force me to really learn anything new as the game went on. But sometimes I get pissed off when games decide that you have to then start using this new tactic to get through it.
Yeah, you get specific enemies that can only be damaged by a certain attack and stuff, and it's just like, I just want to fucking hack and slash sometimes and just go through people if it comes down to it. So
absolutely.
I get.
But it's a good little game, full of, it's linear to a certain extent, but the worlds that you go and visit are quite open, so there are side quests and collectibles and bits and pieces to get. So loads of stuff that you can miss, loads of stuff that you haven't got to bother with, and leveling up is quite fun in the early goings, but you won't need everything that you can get towards the back end. You should be able to get through just the basics.
Yeah. Disappointed it didn't have a multiplayer, or felt like that's been covered by the Battlefront games?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's really hard as well to do.
Seen as like to
do like a melee focused,
online version game. Or something. Yeah,
I mean, For Honor's probably the only thing I can look out there and say they've done it well. Like, I didn't particularly care for For Honor too much because multiplayer is not really my graft. But when I did play it, I thought, to be honest, as a melee combat focused game, they've done a good job. So for me, it wasn't missed. I've always biased towards single player operations, and they got that bit right. Any sort of edition would have been a bonus, but I'm not going to cry about it because it's a fairly meaty campaign, sort of 15 plus hours. So
yeah, which again is, that's kind of what you're looking for with regards to something like this. Like, it's not one out of all of the games that are on our list. This would be the least likely one for me to go and play. I think part of that comes with the fact that I'm not a diehard Star Wars fan. I enjoy the films, but I'm not gonna. I haven't watched the most recent ones. I'm certainly not going to go out and watch it at the cinema or anything like that. So it doesn't pull me in hugely in that sense. But it looks like a very palatable one of those ones that you can go through, and I can definitely see the appeal, like you say, for those that are big Star Wars fans, in that it's just a no-brainer in terms of you can submerge yourself in the environment and get hands-on with being a Jedi. I can see the appeal in that essence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's a good video game outside of just having the Star Wars stuff. But obviously, if you love the Star Wars franchise, then you're gonna love this even more. So, serviceable even on its own. But obviously, if you're not into Star Wars, then you would still enjoy the game. It's got a bit more about it than I expected, I guess, is one of the things that I appreciated about it. It had a lot more solid gameplay mechanics. I was a bit like, wasn't expecting that, if I'm honest. So pleased that they included it.
Yeah, I suppose the way to think of it is if you stripped away the Star Wars title and it just became like some kind of reflective sword as opposed to a lightsaber, and it wasn't embedded in the environment, would it still be as good a game? Is there a certain element of this? Does that Star Wars element take it from being a good, palatable game to a great game?
I think so. Yeah, I think it does help it because Star Wars is a fair. I'm not a diehard fan. I'm much like you. I've watched the films, like even the new ones, but I'm not like Biff and Adkins who bloody love it. So, but I think that because it's a familiar setting with stuff that I'm familiar around just enough that it does add a little bit to it. If it had all that stripped away and was quite generic, you might say, well, it's not all that. It's just stealing ideas from other games. But Star Wars definitely does not hinder it. It certainly helps. Yeah.
That's fair enough. It's just, like I say, I think just ridiculously, I'd almost be more inclined to go and play it if it didn't have the Star Wars fans to it. But that's just me and my stupid backwards brain saying no, don't touch it because it's a video game based on a film. But anyway, I think worthy of being on the list though, based on the reviews that we had of those amongst the Dimp crew that have played it. So another strong contender. Now the next one on the list is a remake, which always starts to raise a few eyebrows and make people sort of stop and question a little bit, because generally I don't like including remakes or remasters and bits and pieces because I feel like it's a bit of a cop-out. That said, from, again, having spoken to you about this game in particular, was almost felt like a completely new game, almost completely redone. And we're talking about Resident Evil 2.
Yes.
Highest reviewed game of the year on OpenCritic for last year.
Yeah.
Which is shocking in itself when, like you say, we look at some of the other games that we've spoken about and some of the ones that we haven't even got on our list of 6. It's surprising to see this be the top rated game of the year. But no one that I know who has played this has had a bad thing to say about it.
No, we'll address the remake thing first. Yeah, you're right. It is a full remake. And what's it? 20 years ago, the OG one, probably longer than that. In fact, probably 25 years ago.
1998.
98, yeah. So over 20 years ago. Compared to the original, it's unrecognisable because it doesn't share any of the tank controls or the isometric view or the pre-rendered background. This is a modern version of a survival horror game that happens to be set using loosely, albeit, in the Resident Evil 2 timeline. Characters and whatnot appear, but what happens to them in some cases is very different, and it doesn't play anything like the old game. It keeps the DNA, I guess, in terms of things like inventory management and puzzles and bits and pieces like that, but is all expanded to fit the modern style of gameplay from a third person, and does a really good job. Does a really, really good job. There's not a lot of negatives you can say about it. It probably has the best zombies ever. and that's probably not a high bar to set, because all I see
been a lot
in
of
most
out
games,
there with zombie games. Yeah,
I mean, probably Dead Rising, I feel like, had decent zombies, like the slow shambling ones. They were decent, but things like DayZ and the World War Z, they're all just run at you and just scrap at you. These fuckers grab you, they bite you, they lumber and whatnot, and they're the best zombies ever. But the graphics, gameplay, puzzle solving, length, it all had everything you'd kind of want out of a game. And yes, it is a remake, and it's set in the on Resident Evil 2. But if you put them side by side, you would never know it is being possible. If it was a straight remaster, then that's where I think you can raise the questions. But the gameplay and the structures changed so much; it is a completely new game.
Yeah, I mean, changing it from the fixed camera to like the over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. They basically, I mean, which came in with Resi 4.
Yep.
And obviously Resi 4 was absolutely incredible. One of my favourite games ever. Played it on multiple platforms. So
even on the Wii,
I mean, yeah, it was great on the Wii. Really worked well with the motion controls, which is something that you won't hear me say about many games. But yeah, just a really good decision to do that with it. Like you say, completely different from the original by the looks of things. They really cleaned it up nicely. And the piece around that you said about having the best zombies, the great thing about this is there is such a diverse mix of zombies as well. You get like when you come to some of the boss fights in the Resident Evil games, it is fucking terrifying. Like they do an excellent job of keeping it fresh and doing different pieces with it. So I mean, it's hard to have a bad word to say against it, really. I haven't played it, tragically, and this really is one of the ones that I will 100% pick up. It was a really early release last year as well.
January, wasn't it?
Yeah, like end of January. And whilst a few of us kind of picked it up as being one of those ones that could do well, I don't think anyone expected it to smash it out the park quite as well as it did.
No, I wasn't prepared for that, but they've done a great job with it. And one of the X factors of it was Mr. X. You've got this big lumbering bastard following you around for at least half of the game, or at least the fear of him following you around for nearly all the game. So you're never settled to a certain extent, because you think that big bastard might just steam through that wall and completely upset the apple cart. And he was terrifying. You can't kill him. He's overpowered. You can stun him shortly to run away, but because it's resource management, that's all at a premium. He really puts you in some tough situations. And it's having played through it twice, because there's two campaigns that are essentially the same. It's a little bit of a remix, but it's different each time, because Mr. X doesn't seem, to have a set pattern. He kind of just roars around doing what he wants, and then based on whether you're making a noise, he'll come find you.
Yeah, whether he decides to come and spoil the day.
Yeah, but he's a great piece of AI that probably in some ways they probably take a few shortcuts of it. I'm sure they do, but it's presented really well. And the only real thing I would say that I didn't like was there are two campaigns, but there's not. They are the same campaign, just with a different character, slightly different dialogue choices. And if you put them both together, they don't make sense in continuity, because they're doing things that the other person did, if that makes sense. So they're not two separate campaigns designed to run along each other, which is a bit of a disappointment, because I felt they could have done that quite easily. Just put, some specific areas or enemies or whatnot into each of either Claire or Leon's campaigns.
Story arc,
Yeah, they couldn't quite manage to blend them together, which is a bit of a disappointment.
No, but I mean that's a real. We're nitpicking here for stuff to pull it up on. I mean, like I say, it's definitely one that I'll pick up. What I was going to lead on to is the Resident Evil 3 remake dropped a matter of days ago now. At the time this podcast is being recorded, hasn't done anywhere near as well. No,
it has not, and.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still put up a decent score, but I think based on last year, everyone was kind of expecting 90 pluses for it, and it's come in at just above 80.
Paper's first pick, so he got sucked into
it. Yeah. I mean, what were you expecting? Big things? I don't know enough about. I haven't looked into Resident 3 that much, so I don't know. It was, again, the original one was Nemesis, which I think was like the isometric again. If I'm
That's it. Yeah, correct.
correct in thinking, have they done the same thing with this one? Do you know, or is it like changed it right over the shoulder?
So here's the problem with what they've done is they've got Resident Evil 2 last year, like a new way to play Resident Evil 2, a new way to play Resident Evil. If we think back to the last game was Resident Evil 7, that's first person. So this is a third person version of Resident Evil, and people are like, oh yeah, it's like Resident Evil 4, but it's modernised with all this. It looks great, fantastic. So Resident Evil 2 they're onto a winner, just getting the basics right.
Yeah.
With Resident Evil 3. It does the same thing. It's unrecognisable from the original, but it's coming, what are we, 13 months, 14 months after Resident Evil 2. It's just too similar.
You think it's hangover from the success of
2? Yeah, it's hurting it, definitely.
Yeah, this is what I was kind of getting onto with 2 having done quite so well, being such a breath of fresh air in terms of a classic redone and redesigned. Is it just too soon after that to bring out Resi 3? But
yeah, absolutely, because the rumour is that they were developing at one point, both of these games are being developed side by side and going to come out as a double pack. And by playing Resident Evil 3 and 2, you can absolutely see the shared assets and the shared parts of it. Yeah, and really, it would have been better off to have it come out a bit later. But I guess they had it ready. They wanted to bundle in this new multiplayer mode that they've been working on, and it's come out, just over a year after 2, and I think people are just a bit fatigued. That's all it is, and that can happen. There's sports games and people moan every year about there's only been tweaks and whatnot. It's almost like that in a certain way, and people have dinged the length of it now, whereas I can't speak to that personally because I've not finished it. I'm not sure that people are sort of getting a little bit... I think people are getting a little bit tired of things in 6-7 hours, and they want things to go into like a dozen hours. So that's hurt it as well. That seems to be a common complaint, that it's a bit too short for a full price game. Yeah,
you always run the risk of that with.
But then it's got the multiplayer mode
of it again. Yeah, but it's tough, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you can't keep everyone happy, can you? Because again, at the start of this podcast, I said I expect something to be 30 to 40 hours for a single player, which a lot of people would consider to be far too long. If I were to pick up a game that lasts me 6 hours, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed with it. So, but
would you want to be in distress for 40 hours, though?
Maybe not Resident Evil distress, because those games really do absolutely try you as hard as they can to put you on edge for literally the whole time that you're playing it. I know Resi 4 inside and out, and it still makes me jump at certain parts if I were to replay it, I reckon. So, but another, again, super solid game. No complaints from anyone for it being on the list. I think it was the one that was most unanimously put forward by the people that had played it. So, 5 solid picks so far, which leads us on to the last one, which I kind of had to bat the corner for.
Yes, you did.
Which is Fire Emblem 3 Houses.
Correct. Had you played previous Fire Emblem games before this?
Very, very, very briefly. I'm trying to think how many I've owned. Maybe one. I think I played others on other people's consoles, maybe, or watched other people play them around other people's houses. But really out of left field, I sniggered at James when he picked it on the fantasy draft. Really just paid it no heed whatsoever. Reviewed really well, obviously, and I was looking for something to play on the Switch at the time, so I thought, sod it, I'll give it a bash, and fell in love with it. Like I say, having not played any of the other 5 games, this for me has certainly been my game of the year. I sank in, I can't even remember how many hours now, but it was a lot. It was another one of these ones that was probably similar to you with Death Stranding. But it's a strategy game. It's a turn-based combat map style strategy, RTS, whatever you want to call it, game. pre-programmed attacks and whatever, and which is exactly right up my street. It is the type of thing that I enjoy. I like my turn-based combat. I like the Final Fantasy games. I like Golden Sun games on the Nintendo console. So I knew it was going to be the type of thing that I would enjoy. But it's just such a bizarre. Like, you have to recruit. You basically become a professor at a university. I want to say college/university.
It's not like Hogwarts, is it?
It's not far. It's not far off in all seriousness. And you get put in charge of one of 3 houses. And basically you have to you have your set starting students, but you can chat to other students throughout the course of the year, and it's calendar based, and there's set battles on set days, and it's all kind of pre-planned, and you can chat to students and give them gifts and try and have meals with them to increase your relationship with them, so that then they want to join your house, and you can get more and more to join you. And
are these students old enough to be with the professor like this? It sounds like the professor's creeping up on them.
Well, I mean, I guess the students are probably some 16 to... it's difficult. It could be university, it could be college. Yeah. It's hard to tell.
They're on the fringes.
Yeah, but the game itself has got 2 or 3 major decision points in it.
Right.
I think it's 4 total, actually, now I say that. 4 major decision points. And they literally branch off in completely different directions. So you go down a completely different story arc.
Yes.
Where you end up battling for certain sides in certain when it all kicks off, you join you have a different allegiance depending on how it's gone, and there's certain students that won't come with you over to fight on that side because of their family heritage and bits and pieces. So there's it's quite a lot to it, and it's quite.
So you might have spent all this time getting to know someone, and then
this is the thing that killed me. I had 4 or 5 students that were my absolute bankers that I leveled up heavily because they were fucking double good, and then it came to the later on stages and they'd all fucked off and were fighting for the other side, and I was just well, this is a fucking disaster. Me getting them to be more powerful has come back to bite me in the arse. So and there was a lot to it. It is quite a heavy investment. It's not one that you can enter into lightly, and you do. It's great. It was great for the Switch. I played probably the majority of it in handheld mode. I probably play my Switch almost completely in handheld mode now. It's very rare that I have it plugged into the television. But it works really well on both. Again, there's a lot of reading. In the same way as Disco Elysium, there is more voiceover bits and pieces, but a lot of the time you'll just be trying to skip through it to get it through it quicker, so it's easier to read it than it is to listen to it. So but I can't really fault it, to be honest. It complete the game, go into New Game Plus mode, so I'm playing through it again to do the other side of the story. And make the different decisions to how I did before. It's hard because I feel like the decisions that I made the first time were the ones that I wanted to make, so it's difficult to then go against what I said first time round, because it's no, I don't go against that person, or no, I don't think that's the right course of action or whatever, but you've got to do it to get every aspect of the story. But really, really good, really, really impressive with it, and I know you've obviously picked it up now, and I think Chappers has as well, so hopefully you guys will get stuck into it and enjoy it just as much as I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I had an eye on, but it was a bit of a cluster towards the back end of last year, and because I'd never played a Fire Emblem game, I was also a bit like, am I going to like this? Am I going to enjoy it? So there's always a bit of a risk for me jumping into it. But having played things like Disco Elysium, and opening my eyes to different types of games. I just finished Undertale recently. I'm kind of getting into trying to find these other types of games that steer away from just action or open world or whatever, and experiencing those. So definitely one for the list for sure, and a worthy contender to be on our nominations list. That brings us to 6 nominations, which are Control, Death Stranding, Disco Elysium, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Resident Evil 2, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. We are going to reveal the winner, but not before we just go through a couple of quick personal pick awards that we do every year. on some other games, and the awards we're going to give out are biggest disappointment, best surprise, and the one that got away. Quite self-explanatory. The one that got away is a game that you would have liked to have played but didn't for whatever reason. But let's start with biggest disappointment, which is we got rid of the wooden spoon because, like you said earlier, there's not a lot of double shit games out there to waste time with. There's too much good stuff. So at least framing it as a disappointment means that it doesn't mean it's a bad game, just that we were perhaps expecting more. Mr. Hall, what have you gone for in your biggest disappointment?
So it's tough because, as we keep reiterating, I've played a lot of good games this year, and I think I've enjoyed pretty much everything that I've played. Certainly everything that came out last year, I enjoyed playing. So if I'm picking the one that's probably my biggest disappointment, harsh as it sounds, it's probably Pokemon Sword or Pokemon Sword and Shield combo.
At the start of the year, I would have had that as a banker as one of the 6 nominees. Pokemon, like the new Pokemon game on Switch. I was expecting such big things from that. I thought on the Switch they'll expand it, they'll make it this, that, and the other. But it's completely slipped my mind, as you can probably tell by my reaction just then. Yeah,
so a lot of people were hoping for exactly that. It'd be a big open world with the power of the Switch. So it'd be like the original ones, but just in 3D and massive. And that's kind of what it is.
Right.
The biggest... My biggest issues are it's almost a little bit too big, and like the thing with the original one. Now there's so many Pokemon as well. There's I don't even know how many, like fucking 750, 850, 900. It could be anything.
Did they cull some from this one?
They haven't got all of them in it, which is a big no. Especially as they haven't got the core 151 originals.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the people that are going to be buying Pokemon Sword are going to be people of our age who played blue, red,
yellow,
silver, whatever, gold, sapphire, like the original ones. I don't see there being loads of people who like have bought the Switch as their first console for their kids, or early teens, who are going to then look at Pokemon Sword and Shield and go, I'm going to have that. Like, that's one that I want to play.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, like, a lot of the Pokemon Sword piece was nostalgia for me, and not having the base 151 Pokemon, so I can't get Squirtle, for example.
Yeah.
Just kind of kills me a little bit inside.
Yeah.
And like I say, the piece around it being too big, there's so many of these and some of the new Pokemons, they have got lazy with the design. There's no two ways about it. There is some real shit looking Pokemon out there. It's just there's like, you used to be able to go onto a route and you'd catch all the Pokemon from that route and then you could move on, or you could just, like, you used to get frustrated that there was too many trainer battles in a small space or whatever, and now it's all so far apart. It's just a bit too much running around and a bit too much openness to really get stuck into it for me. It was one that I played for quite a bit, but I've not completed, and I can't see myself going back to it in a massive hurry. They introduced a bit of sort of compatibility between that Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee.
Yeah.
And now there's a little bit of compatibility with Pokemon Go as well, but I feel like it's just too far past the Pokemon Go's kind of died out a little bit now. I don't think there's loads of it. It's not got the hardcore fan base it did when it first came.
No.
And Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were just shit. There's no two ways about it. They weren't right. They tried to cut out the battling stage.
I'd rather play Pokemon Shield, but it be red, like remake red, basically.
Yeah, what they needed to do was they needed to get Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee correct, because they were red and blue remastered, but then they just took out the battling of wild Pokemon, so you just threw Pokeballs randomly at them, and it just killed me a little bit on the inside. So. Yeah, that for me is my disappointment of the year. And that's not to say that it's a terrible game by any stretch. I still put quite a lot of time into it, but it's not one I'm going to pick up in a hurry again and finish off, unfortunately.
No, that's fair enough. And Pokemon historically has been a top game of the year, and I feel like that sentiment of being a bit disappointment is shared across a lot of the community. There's a lot of people not happy with some of the decisions they've made, and it just didn't seem to catch as you know, he normally catches fire every year and is like lots of hype and whatnot. But this one definitely didn't have the same clout that the previous ones had, which is a shame because I really wanted to dive into this and play it, but because of the kind of lukewarm reception that it got off, not just people like you, but also the critics, it wasn't, it's still good. Like you wouldn't not want it on your fantasy team, but I was expecting a bit more from it.
Yeah, as we said, with so many games coming out, so many sort of solid games coming out last year, it was going to be one of those ones that was first to hit the chopping block and get cut from being played, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
So what about you? What was your disappointment for the year?
Biggest disappointment for me, I was to and fro between two of them. Out of fairness to the other game, I will not mention it because it doesn't deserve to be tarnished. It can you can just get away with it. But undoubtedly, it was Trials Rising. I fucking love Trials, or loved Trials, I should say. I really did enjoy Trials as a game, from Trials HD to Fusion to there's been about 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. So when Trials Rising was announced, I was like, well, that's just an easy banker, no brainer, day one. Oh, look, there's a gold edition for 35 quid. I'll get that as well. Thinking there's nothing to worry about this game because they've never let me down before. And I did a long review with Logan at some point last year with Trials Rising, and I got really pissed off with the way they changed the progression system in this. It was no longer a case of getting enough medals to get the next piece of content. Yeah. You had to level up your rider by basically redoing contracts and specialist bits. And I was like, this is
Why do that? Why change? Yeah. Why change a winning formula?
Yeah. So stupid, and it really, I don't know, I just got so pissed off with the way they did that I was replaying. And some of these contracts are fucking rock hard, but it's the only way to get XP. And you sort of you spend half the time hunting around on a map that is not intuitive to get around, trying to find a contract that's got worthwhile XP, but isn't going to take 6 hours to try and do. Like fucking do a wheelie whilst not stopping or braking. It's like, well, hang on, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah, cut that out, less of that.
Yeah, so no, it wasn't a bad game. If you love Trials, you'll like this, but the fact that they just completely dropped the bollock on the fundamentals really got to me and disappointed me with Trials Rising. And now it goes from one of those series where, day one,
absolute
pre-order
done,
to, well, let's have a look and see what you're doing next time, because that could be the end of it.
Yeah.
No, blowers.
Shame.
It is a shame, but that's what you get, unfortunately, in this life.
Yeah.
But
one chance.
Disappointment. Yeah, one chance. One wrong move and you get put on the blacklist, and it's not where you want to be, really. Best surprise, Mr. Hall. What are you going to surprise us with?
Well,
it's a hard one, this, I find, because a lot of the stuff I research enough not to be surprised by it. Yeah. Being good. But
agreed. Especially as we do quite a lot of looking up for the fantasy draft and bits and pieces, and we look into a lot of things, which is why it's, for me, I've obviously spoken about it a lot already, as nominated it as Game of the Year, but it's got to be Fire Emblem for me. Fire Emblem Three Houses. As I said before, I laughed at James. I didn't think anything of it. Didn't think it was going to be one that would do well. It was really, really highly reviewed. I bought it purely based off of the reviews that I'd seen other people make, and I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. It was easily the game that I played most last year. It was on the Switch, which,
again,
everyone knows how much of a fiend I am for achievements, and it takes a lot to pry me away from playing stuff on the Xbox for a long period of time. It'll either be because other people are playing something or because a game is just so good, and that's exactly what this was. It took me it was tough to put it down. I wanted to play it every day, which is rare for a game. You know what I mean? Once you get properly into something, I'd just be like, and because the Switch is handheld as well, it just meant that of an evening time, I just lay in bed and play it. And then it'd be, before you know it, it's 1:15 in the morning. I'm like, I've really got to put this down and get on with it, because it's calendar based and you could do so much, and there was Like you have to go and talk to the students every day, and like I say, I do love a monotonous task.
Yeah.
So I'd just be like, oh, okay, I'll just play like another week's worth of stuff.
That's it.
And it's like you just go around and talk to everyone and make sure I tick all the boxes and I utilize all my points to make sure I level up correctly. And it's just a killer. But yeah, loved it, and I'm glad. It was a good surprise. It's nice to have something like that, because it's been a long time since I've had a game which I really like. It's normally the other way around, that I'm desperately looking forward to a game and then it either gets shit reviews or it gets good reviews and then I'm not into it at all. So it's nice for it to be this way around for a change, where something that I initially poo-pooed, I've been dramatically wrong about.
Yeah, it's always the best place to be, for sure, and rightfully earns its spot there as best surprise, and also still one of a chance of winning Game of the Year 2019.
Yeah. Surprised? What's coming in? Hit me with. There's so many games to choose from. Be interesting to see, because you probably played as many games as I did last year in terms of 2019 releases. I think we played, between you and I think we probably played more than anyone else out of the Dimp crew in terms of 2019 games that came out. So I'm intrigued to see what your surprise was, and whether it was a surprise in a good way or a surprise in a shit way.
No, I mean, it's a surprise in a good way, and it's also a surprise in the amount of time I spent into it. It's similar to, Fire Emblem in that case, that Death Stranding clocking up 100 hours.
Yeah.
There's something not right about that, but I enjoyed every second of it, and I'm the biggest Metal Gear Solid fan, but I know that Kojima comes with baggage and weird stuff, and that some of his stuff doesn't work. And the worry was, okay, he's been let loose to just make whatever game he wants. Will it actually be any good, or will it just be a complete clusterfuck? And it's probably somewhere in between, but it's fucking compelling, and it sucked me right in. So Death Stranding would be my biggest surprise, because I think the narrative was set up for it to be dog shit, ultra shit, and some people think it's that, but I'm in the other camp where I really enjoyed it, and I think the stuff they've done with the online connectivity is just fantastic, and the shared pieces and whatnot. It makes you want to help this community of people you've never met and never will meet, but you're helping real human beings. Yeah. So it's very good.
Yeah, it is just a surprise game, isn't it? It was so on a teeter-totter as to, like, there was so much hype surrounding it, and generally a lot of the games that have such a huge amount of hype surrounding it. I know I was talking to you last year about this pre-release, and I was convinced it was going to bomb. And like you say, Kojima's such a mad bastard, and he's he loves to bring in Norman, doesn't he, to do his bits and pieces for him as well. And it's just Kojima being Kojima in his own little world. And it was like I say, it was literally on a seesaw as to it could have gone one way or the other. I'm glad that it went the way that it did, and so many people have been satisfied with it. I can see, obviously, like you say, there are still people that think it's at the other end of the spectrum of why would you play this game. But
yeah.
I mean,
it's so unique. It really is. And unique doesn't mean good or that it's going to have mainstream appeal, but it means, for at least for a certain point, it's interesting. If you get hooked on something that you perceive as unique, you're in trouble. And I was in trouble at the end of last year, fucking doing what you were doing, sitting up till 3 o'clock in the morning, going, right, where am I going to get these materials for the roads? And
bizarre.
then I thought, cool,
absolutely bizarre,
but a great surprise to have.
Yeah.
We'll move on to my favourite little personal award that we do, and this is the one that got away. So the game that you either had earmarked or wanted to play, or it came out, then the reviews turned you and thought, I want to play that, but because there's so many great games out there, you ran out of time and didn't get it. So Hall, what is your one for the one that got away in 2019?
So there's quite a few. It's not. It's hard to put your finger on exactly one. I mean, of the top 6 that we've already talked about, I mentioned that I still want to pick up Resi 2 and play it. I'd like to play Disco Elysium. I'd like to have a bash at Death Stranding, Control. Star Wars I'm not so worried about. But there was a lot of other big ones that came out last year, like Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, that I didn't get around to playing. The one I think that that I'm most disappointed about missing out on is probably, and bearing in mind this is on Game Pass, and I appreciate that I could literally play it now if I wanted to, is the Outer Worlds.
Yes,
it was one again that I didn't know much about. I know a few people out of the Dimp guys have played it and have got nothing but good things to say about it. It reviewed reasonably well, but it just looks like the type of game that I will be really into. It looks like my type of game again in terms of the way that it plays and the style of game, and I just never got round to it. Never gave myself the opportunity to play it. I'm still persevering through the backlog of games from last year as it is. So it's tough to find time to play these games like Outer Worlds that are sort of 30 to 40 hour campaigns. It's tough to find somewhere to slot that into the schedule. So I'm a bit gutted that so far I haven't got around to it. Maybe I will do, but it's just with this year's game releases being as they are, coming thick and fast, it's hard to see myself finding time anytime soon to pick that up and chow through it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I've played it, and I really like the Outer Worlds, and I can see why people will be apprehensive to play it, because it kind of demands a reasonable amount of time and commitment towards it, because it's an open world RPG, decision making, leveling up your character, all that stuff. There's quite a bit to it. But what I will say is it's not as I guess intimidating is not the right word, but that's what I'm going to go down, as like a Fallout. It's
or
not
a Mass
like
Effect or anything like that. Yeah.
It's not like that level. It's more of a Mass Effect, but a little bit smaller, so it's a bit more streamlined, but it still gives you those areas to go off and explore. And the best thing about the game really is the writing, the characters, the comedy in it, and just how the choices you can make in that game far exceed most other games in terms of choice narrative, and they've always got an answer for you. If you do something you think, I'm going to break the game, you won't. They've already thought of it, and you can do it, and there'll be a sensible outcome to it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those ones that if you play like a good guy, quote unquote, throughout all your games, you probably won't get the most out of this game.
You've got to push the boundaries a little bit and be a little bit.
Be a bit weird with it. Do stuff you wouldn't normally do, and you'll be rewarded handsomely.
Experiment.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I played it really was because it was on Game Pass. That's the only reason I would have gone out of my way to do it. I thought, well, it seems a bit too good to just sort of turn my nose up at it, so I went down that road. But there you go.
Yeah.
Where are we at now? That's it, isn't it?
Well, no, one that got away for you.
Oh yeah, my one. This is your fault because you've sold it so well, not just on this podcast, but in the lead up to our discussions for nominations. But Fire Emblem Three Houses has to be on my one that got away. It's sitting there on that Switch hard drive. There's not a hard drive, is it? Bloody SD card.
Yeah.
Expensive bastards. But it's sitting there waiting to be played. I'm too busy shaking trees and Animal Crossing at the moment. But
yeah,
I want to make this a project to do. And I know it will have to be a project because it's not a slap and dash quick game. It's going to require a level of commitment and consistency for me to play it in its best manner. But you've basically sold me on Fire Emblem Three Houses, so that's the one that got away from me last year. I regret missing it because I've been trying to play stuff outside my normal wheelhouse. That fits right in perfectly to that sort of let's try something you haven't tried before.
Yeah, it's a great game. It is a shame that more people haven't dived into it. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And I suppose my worry is that people play it and then go, what are you talking about, Hull? This is shit. But yeah, I can't recommend it enough to people, that especially, as you say, in terms of fitting into that wheelhouse of stuff that you wouldn't normally pick up and play. I think it'll tick a lot of boxes for you, and I think you'll enjoy it. I think you are the type of person that will be able to get into it and play it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, it feels like it could be a bit of a gateway into more JRPGs, more traditional ones, because it's something I've always wanted to sort of dive into but been a bit scared of, whereas this feels like there's an opening there for me to start walking through and saying, would I enjoy a more in-depth version of this or
that's a real sorry rabbit hole to go down, though. That is the problem. Yeah, once you start getting into that and the Final Fantasies and stuff, you will be in all sorts of problems.
Yeah, so I've got to be careful of how I do that, how I approach that. But Fire Emblem Three Houses, the one that got away for me. Right, we've come to the end. it's time to reveal the winner of our 2019 Dimp Digital Game of the Year. Hall, do you want to do the honours? Since we don't get you that often, you can reveal what our collective... Yeah, what our collective game of the year is.
Yeah.
You can tell us if it's right or wrong in your mind.
Well, I mean, like we said at the beginning, I think across the 6 games that we've got to choose from, that we've narrowed it down to, I think we could have picked any one of the 6 and everyone within Dimp probably would have been reasonably happy. It's difficult, obviously, because, as we mentioned, not everyone's played every game, and I'm the only one that's played Fire Emblem, for example, so I'm pleased that's even made the final 6. Disco Elysium was so left field that, I'm glad that was on the list, because it just looks like such a fun, different concept, and it's taking it back to a bit more old school style of gaming.
Yeah.
Death Stranding, such a random Kojima headfuck doing what he does. Control, again, looked amazing. Super highly acclaimed. People seem to jump into it, and no one that I know has had a bad word to say about that. Mm-hmm. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order obviously has got its obvious appeal of being tied into such a popular franchise, but they seem to have finally done things right. It's been the best. I think it's fair to say it's been the best Star Wars game we've had probably since the Rogue Squadron games of the N64. Yeah, exactly. But borderline unanimously across most of Dimp, it's certainly everyone that's played it, I think, had this almost at the top of their list. It's certainly within their top 3. Resident Evil 2 has been heralded by everyone that's played it as one of the best games, if not the best game that they played last year. So I don't think it's any surprise to most of us that the game of the year for 2019 is Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it was highly played, and it was popular amongst everyone that played it. And yes, it had the tag of it being a remake, but I think it done so much to overcome that tag, because that's a hurdle in itself, just to get people to take it seriously as a game in 2019. But they really done a great job with this, and it's just something that I plan. I've got it on a steelbook. I'll plan to play it through again for sure. And I'm looking for. I'd love for them to do the original in this style, like redo that one. I think that would work really well, and have the first trilogy on modern platforms. It's actually playable, because I don't care what you say. The tank controls are shit, and the pre-rendered backdrop is shit. Like, do them in this style, and then everyone can jump in and play them and enjoy them. But Resi 2, happy to see that get our 2019 Dimp Digital Game of the Year.
Yeah, worthy winner.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Hall. We finally got our Game of the Year ceremony out, and it happens to be, I guess, the first proper episode of the new Idle Game Chat here on the Dimp Digital Network. So you'll always have that status until we change it again, because we always get bored and have to liquidate everything and change it.
Freshen things up.
Yeah, exactly. But for the foreseeable future, you will have that accolade of being the first proper episode of Idle Game Chat. And we look forward to what 2020 will bring us. I think the plan, we've spoken about doing a game of the decade, which will take a bit of time to deliberate and come out with. So that'll be, I guess, 2010 to 2019. And something that we've all wanted to do is create some form of Dimp Digital Gaming Hall of Fame. So Hall, you will be involved in both of those discussions, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And we'll come up with a system or something whereby we can present that to everyone. But thanks for giving up your time this afternoon, and obviously thanks everyone for listening. If you're on a podcast outlet, just hit subscribe, and then you can get everything that we drop there and then. And very pleased to have you on board. But nothing more for us to say apart from thanks for your time, and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.